Hi, Karen Romano Young, back again with Alice the Giraffe and My Cup of Tea, and A Girl, a Raccoon, and the Midnight Moon. Written by me, with illustrations by Jessica Bagley, and published by Chronicle Kids in 2020. Chapter 37, The Worst Case. October 17th to 18th. Too many had climbed up, too many had come down. Now there was an actual crack in the iron that held the spiral stairs in place. Ramon was quick to rope off the top and bottom of the staircase with lengths of line, and Pearl was dispatched to Gully's to buy caution tape. "Problem across the street?" Gully asked, eyes glittering. "Nothing we can't fix," said Pearl, knowing it was a lie. Upon her return, she saw that Bruce had taken action. 2x4 pieces of wood hammered in an X kept everyone from going up the spiral stairs and blocked them from entering the glass-floored area from the reading room to nonfiction. "To be safe and legal, you'd better shut off the whole reading room," Nichols said, his face grave. And I'm just going to page back until I find the beautiful illustration that Jessica did of the spiral stairs. Sorry if it takes a minute, but you have to see it just to know what we're all talking about here. Imagine a crack in those stairs. Of course, Jonathan Yoicks chose that day to return the books about Vincent. "What happened here?" he asked. Next came Gully. He couldn't resist that caution tape tip-off, Pearl thought, and he was soon followed by Mr. Bull and Mr. Dozer. It was as if the crack in the stairs was a disturbance in some force that brought onlookers to the scene of a potential crisis and builders to a crumbling place that needed their particular steel and concrete. Pearl felt as though her heart was barely beating. Still and shocked, she forced herself to go and stand by the reference desk so she wouldn't miss anything. Nichols was nearby in his chair, with the paper held up in front of his face. Yoicks had his writing pad out. "Surely," he said, "if there's someone in the city who can shape a rock into a head, there's someone who can fix a cast iron staircase." "Not to code," said Mr. Bull and Mr. Nichols at the same moment. They looked at each other. "Wasn't it to code before?" asked Yoicks. "Well, it would have been grandfathered in," said Mr. Dozer. "Old stuff that's still in decent condition can stay until it fails. But once it fails, it has to be repaired to code. But there's no code for cast iron and glass." "What does that mean?" whispered Pearl. Nichols said in a low voice, "It means you wouldn't get approval for building something out of those materials today, so sometimes you can't rebuild it at all." Yoicks nodded as if grateful for the interpretation. "So, what are the library's options? Is this going to speed things up?" he asked carefully. Pearl knew what he meant. How bad is this for the library? Mr. Dozer said, "There'll have to be an inspection, and when there is, the city's going to have something to say." "What are they going to say?" Pearl couldn't stop herself from piping up. "They're going to condemn the building, hon," said Mr. Dozer. "Condemn it? If the building was condemned, they wouldn't be able to stop the construction people from turning it into whatever they wanted. Pearl knew they could knock it down, wrecking ball and everything, if they wanted. A condemned building was unsafe for everyone around it. The silence among the adults was awful. It was the silence of adults waiting for harsh reality to hit a child. A sidebar about truth. You might as well tell kids what's going on. They'll find out anyway. By M.A.M. "No," said Pearl. She wasn't yelling it. She wasn't saying it angrily. She was refusing. "No, we can't allow that." There was a little frustrated sigh of adults, realizing that a child was not about to accept reality. Mr. Dozer went out the door. Pearl wasn't his problem. "Coming up with more drama is not going to help, Pearl," said Bruce. Nobody else said anything. Everyone was looking at her. She knew she was meant to feel insulted, but she didn't. She just said, "Well, what are we going to do?" Then they all glanced back and forth among themselves. All this time, since the spiral staircase had cracked, Mom had stood watchful and silent, holding back her reaction, not offering her opinion about the questions raised by the journalist and the builders and the head librarian and the reference librarian and the page and the patron, Nichols. But when her own daughter, the librarian's child, asked, Mom spoke. "We'll do anything we can, Pearl," she said. "We'll do everything we can. And then we'll see what happens. And then, when we have to, we'll move on." "Move on?" shouted Pearl. "Move on where?" "It'll be okay, Pearl," said Nichols. Bruce, across the room, said softly, "Come on, Pearl." Nobody else said anything. This time they didn't even look at each other. They looked at their feet or over their shoulders or across the room. "I'm not moving on," Pearl announced. "There's got to be a way to fix it. There's got to be a way to get it to code." She thought of the raccoons in the basement and what could happen to them, and it gave her even more fighting energy. "Grown-ups give up too easy. I'm not going to. This whole neighborhood's at stake, everyone who lives here, the school and the stores and the apartments and the raccoons and everything else." She stood there panting, teary. "Nothing is permanent, Pearl," Jonathan Yoik said softly. Pearl couldn't let herself hear that. It was as if darkness fell around her as she ran for the foyer, crashed through the front doors, and blasted down the steps. It was the first time in Pearl's life that she had run from the library. Pearl was not there on Thursday morning when the city inspector arrived. She was not there to follow him past circulation and into the reading room to watch his face as he examined the deterioration of the spiral staircase and the fracturing of its supports, then the rest of the bookcases, mezzanine floor, and balcony rails. She was not there to hear him laugh a weary laugh as he ran a hand over the roses embossed on the iron bookcase ends and railings and saw flecks of rust fall through the morning beams of light. She was not there to hear Alice sniff as she watched from the children's room doorway through the 800s to the mezzanine. She was not there when he filled out the form, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and posted it on the front door. But she couldn't avoid it forever. It was firmly up when Pearl came home from school, and "condemned" was on it. But "It's only the reading room," said Simon, "and the spiral staircase, of course. In short, anything with cast iron." And it counted the glass floor of the mezzanine that had long since been roped off from the public out of common sense and was now officially closed. It meant that the library could be open as long as the entrances to the spiral stairs from below and the mezzanine from above stayed off limits. "It's one more strike against us," said Simon. "One more item on the budget," said Bruce. And Pearl knew without needing Ramon or anyone else to spell it out for her. One more nail in the coffin. The condemned notice was an unthinkable, unspeakable change. Pearl let out a roar. She flung herself toward the back hall, crashed through the garden door, and slammed out. Everything in the garden waited silent and unresponsive around her. The pines and yews stood there dark and evergreen, and Vincent just stood there with her empty neck, her empty hand. The sun went down behind Oleg's apartment building, and the garden turned cold and dark. Nobody came looking for Pearl. Not Francine, not Nichols, not Simon, not even Mom or Ramon or Alice or Bruce. She sat alone with her back against the only remotely warm place at the stone base of Vincent's pedestal, the grass under her bottom cool and dampening, the lights going on in the apartment windows, the trees darkening from green to blue to black as the evening grew. Pearl sat with her fingers laced through fading grass and lavender on either side, combing through the fronds, crumbling the old blossoms. It felt as though her fingers were the only things holding her to earth. She didn't know how much time had passed when she suddenly noticed movement, something small coming toward her through the grass. Marianne. Pearl felt in her pocket for a pen and found a Sharpie, but couldn't find anything to write on. Marianne shook her head, a motion that seemed to say, "That's all right." She sat like a cat, forepaws set neatly together, rounded back in a hump, tail curled around herself, on the chilly rocks beside Pearl. The two of them waited there together. Waiting for what? Pearl asked herself. She didn't have an answer. When at last Mary Ann rose and trundled toward the back of the library, Pearl stood up too. She was stiff and cold. Mom was standing at the back door looking out for her. Mom pulled Pearl in. "You okay?" "Yeah," said Pearl. It was a lie, of course, told by a child to comfort her mother. Thank you for listening. I'll see you tomorrow.